I'm Krista, I'm an addict.
I'm Gracie and I'm not.
I'm Rob. I'm an addict.
Today we have a special guest. We have my friend Rob, who has a powerful story. I don't want to take much of his time up, and so the floor is yours, Rob.
Like I said, thank you, Krista, and for having me on and asking. And this is another way for me to stay sober today, and I appreciate that. So, my name's Rob. I'm an addict. I've been sober since September 9th, 2022. And I'm just going to qualify myself real quick as fast as I can and move on from there. So, the earliest thing that I can remember that affected my life and that I feel like fueled a lot of my use and drove me into just fighting God and the system and just everything. And that was so at 4 years old, my earliest memory was of my mom passing away. And I was in the house there, and it took a few years for me to fully understand, like, okay, my mom died. I was only four. So I was taken in by my aunt at the time. My mother made a decision to have her take me in, and she could. That was probably the single greatest thing my mother ever did. Um, was making that choice because she could not have made a better choice for a mother. So I was blessed with the second mother. However, I didn't see that blessing for many years to come. So I'm being raised in a house where everything is great. It's normal. Dinners on the table every night. I'm playing sports every weekend. Um, my they're not alcoholics. They're not drug addicts. I've never seen them. My parents argue out loud, hit each other, any of that. However, any chance I got, no matter how, in my childhood was as stable as you could I think as you could probably be. So, but every chance I got to manipulate or to use the fact that I didn't belong there, I used that to separate myself. I was never made to feel like on the side or different or anything like that. I found myself using the fact that I lost my mother and I wasn't blood relative to that family. I found that too, and I used that to my effect any way I could at a very young age. Anytime things didn't go my way, well, I'm not your real son. You would do that for, my other brother. I mean, I can imagine what that was like for my parents. But so my youth started very young. And so on the weekends, I would go every now and then, I would go with my biological father. And he was hardcore crackhead, hardcore alcoholic, extremely violent. So, my mother made the decision that he wasn't to get me. I was to stay with his sister. So every now and then he would show up on the weekend. I would go with him. So my first use was not what a lot of people say. It wasn't like, oh my God, I found what I love. My first use was terrifying, and that's the only word I know to describe it. So I'm like 11 years old. It's like 1994. Yeah, maybe early 95. So it's me and my dad, and we're walking. He's hardcore crack addict. So here I was at 11 years old. I was at a stable house all week through the week, all year long. And then every now and then on the weekend, I would live like a crackhead because I would go with him and we'd be out 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, just apartment building to apartment building, trailer park to trailer park. And so one night I was complaining. I was like, look, I want to call my mom. I want to go home. And it got to the point my dad was like, no, I'm not letting you call. We don't have a phone. There wasn't cell phones then, of course. Um, and finally, I got to the point where I was like, look, I'm telling. As soon as I get a chance, I'm telling them to do. I'm never going back here again. And I kind of went in the other room, but my dad followed me in there, and he had a crack pipe in his hand. He said, "Come here," and he made me sit down at the table. He handed me the pipe. He melted the crack on the pipe. He said, "Now you're gonna fucking smoke this." And my dad was terrified. He was a terrifying person. So I did. I mean, I did what I was told, and immediately got sick. Of course, I'm 11 years old, and then of course after I get myself together, he's like, "Now you're smoking crack too." He's like, "You can't tell. We both did it." So that was my first use, and I didn't use again until I was 14, and I never said anything to anybody. My mother still doesn't know that story. So, but I don't know. I've come to terms with that now, and I'll tell you how I got there too to do that. So, my next use was the high that I chased for many years to come. I'll never forget it. I was eighth grade, about to go into the ninth. So I was 14. So I'm playing football. I'm excelling in sports. Like I drowned myself in sports, like especially baseball, football. Like off seasons, I remember throwing baseballs in the winter out in my backyard. 6 inches of snow, I would be out there. A, a basket of baseballs just thrown until my arm fell off. And I was the same way with football. And so we have a great football team that year, and we only got like 13 guys on our football team. It was like that the first year of high school too. So I played offense and defense. We never got a break. And a good friend of mine, Brian, it was before we was at the Jamboree. It was like championship game. We was undefeated that year. And so before the game, Brian pulls me off to the side. He's like, "Man, you got to try this shit." He was like, "You are never going to get tired." He was like, "You're never going to get tired." And it was anhydrous meth, old school. It was like, so this was 1996. So he cut out a couple lines of meth, and I snorted one, he snorted one. I remember like, "Oh my God, what did you just give me?" Because that shit burns like hell. I'm sure a lot of you know.
Yeah.
So I'm raw. So we go out there. We have a great game. Everything goes great. Like I killed it that game. I couldn't have. I just killed it. I crushed, and we won. And we had a party that night. And so this is like the first time I really drank. I always hated the taste of alcohol, but this night I drank, and it was Kessler's. I'll never forget it. So it was Kessler. I already got my high off the meth. I got drunk off the Kessler, and the party was like, it was a great party that night. And I got laid that night for the first time. So I'll lose my virginity. We win the championship. I get high on meth for the first time. And I'm like, this is it. It's the greatest feeling in the world. So from then on, you couldn't tell me shit. I was going to play in the NFL. I was going to have a lot of women and do a lot of drugs and make a lot of money. And so I set the bar really high that night, and I never hit it again. So I go into my ninth grade year. During that 3-month break before I went into high school, I got sucked right into the meth. Like when I did that meth, I was hooked. Like from the get go, within a month, I was a several times a week user. So by the time 3 months goes by, going to high school, I'm cooking meth from scratch. Like I'm getting the pills, I'm stealing anhydrous, I'm smoking it off, I'm weighing it up, I'm selling it, you name it. And I was always full flight from reality. I like that term because by this time, in just 3 months, I went from wanting to play in the NFL, wanting to play college ball. You couldn't tell me I wouldn't play college ball 2 months prior to this. Well, of course, by the time ninth grade year starts, I want to be a gangster. I want to be a drug dealer, and I don't ever want to work. And this is how I'm going to do it. And thought I had everything planned out. So drugs and crime, this is where my life really took a huge turn. So I got addicted to that lifestyle just as much as I did drugs. And come to find out many years later, I'll get to that. So by now I'm a full blown drug dealer, um, full blown meth addict. And before the first game of football, the next year, I get in a fight in school over drug money, get kicked off the football team, and I just took off full flight. I was just after that, I didn't give a shit about nothing. You couldn't tell me nothing. And from there on, I was just sucked into drug dealing and whatever else kind of criminal activity would make me money. And at this time, I'm 15. So by the time I'm 17, I catch my first charge. Uh, I got caught in Indiana. They got me with like 20 pounds of brick weed, 2 ounces of cocaine at 17. They give me 11 years for that. And so from then until about the age of 35, that was my life. It was going to prison. While I was in prison, my behaviors never changed. It was constantly, how can I get my next dollar? How can I get my next high? How can I get over on you? And I remind you this, like this whole time, I believed in God. I understood there was a God, in my opinion, but I chose to hate him. Like I was like, I understand this is the team, and there's a team over here. I'm choosing this team. Like I knowingly was like, no, I'm going this way. You know, I knew all I could ever really relate with God was that He took my mother from me, and that was it. So for the next 15 years, my life was basically locked up. And so while I'm in Indiana, I start talking to a girl while I'm in prison up there. She starts coming up to visit. I'm going outside the fence of the penitentiary to work, and she's meeting me, and we start fooling around, of course, and she gets pregnant. So she got pregnant, and here I am. I'm 8 months, and this was God like giving me a chance. Now that I look back, like I found out she's pregnant, and my serve out date is 8 months away. So I get out 2 weeks before my baby's birthday, or before he's born. And looking back now, it sucks that wasn't enough to change me, but it wasn't. So for many other years, I was back in prison. Well, I was back in county jail with new felonies within 4 months of being released. It was assaults and more drug charges, but anyway. So I didn't see my son again for another 4.5 years. He was almost 5 the next time I got to lay eyes on him. And that was tough. And that was tough. So I come home, and the woman I was with at the time, this is my previous wife, she has 2 other smaller children, and Lennon and Evan, and Landon. He's the oldest, but he wasn't even living with her at the time. So I fall in love with these kids. Like when I wasn't in prison, I would get out, and I used to think I was a good dad because when I got out of prison, I would get my kids on the weekend. Every weekend, never failed. I got my kids every weekend. So like I was just, couldn't tell me I didn't love my kids. And I would always get my stepkids. And I just had a bond with them. They still call me dad to this day. So I just wanted to touch base on that because that's about to come in a little bit. So I'm gonna fast forward to 2016. By the time 2016 comes around, I am my worst self, and I'm in a very dark place. I burnt all my bridges. My parents, my nieces and nephews, I had 13 of them. I had very close relationship with them at one time, and they had all become like really sketchy of me. So 2016, I meet a woman, and she's a childhood friend of mine. She was actually my first kiss. And we start dating. She's never been around drugs or anything like that. And of course, me being me, I put this girl through hell for like the next 5 years, and really ruined her life for that 5 years. She lost a lot of things over me. So when that ended bad, I found myself being the exact person my father was to me. Like, I didn't make my kids smoke crack or smoke meth, but I abused them in just about every way you could think of, emotionally and mentally. Of course, never physically or sexually or anything like that, but I damaged my kid's brain probably way worse than he did mine, because I was around mine a lot more than he was around me. So it come to a point to where my own son and my wife now, her children, got to the point I went to get my son from my wife now, her house. And so my oldest son steps in front of my wife, and he says, "Look, you need to leave. I don't ever want to see you again. Nobody here wants to ever see you again. Just get out." And I left, and man, I was so disconnected that, I mean, I just wanted to die. So I'll get to the point to where 2 days later, I remember walking into my mom's bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, and I'm looking at myself like disgust, and I'm crying. And I didn't know who I was at my mom's house. I thought I snuck in the back door. I got a gun on my hip. I got a knife on this hip. I got drugs in my pocket. And I'm thinking to myself, you're the only person who's going to stop you. It's like, you better stop yourself, because, who knows what's going to happen. So I just remember looking at myself and thinking, you have to put an end to you before something really terrible happens. And I felt like a bullet was too good for me. So I put my gun in the air vent by the toilet. I put my drugs down there. And just as quick as the thought happened, I mean, I didn't plan it. I didn't know what I was going to do. The knife came up and I cut my throat. Like, I was severed my esophagus. It wasn't a plea for help or a cry for help. It was, I was trying to die, and almost succeeded. So that there's the trachea scar that was left. So I was in a coma for 7 weeks. I come to find out that nobody came to the emergency room while I was there. Nobody came to ICU. That's a terrible feeling. That's a terrible feeling. And I didn't find out till a couple months later. My grandmother was in the living room. My parents were in the living room. One of my nieces was in the living room. I had no idea. I was so out of my mind when I walked in the house and went to that bathroom. Like, I had no idea who was there. And so I did that. That's just what happened. That's just where I was at, where the lifestyle took me. And it didn't get any better. So I'll fast forward again to where I get clean. So I'm 38. And my wife and me are still on rocky terms, and I'm ready to die again. So I do another suicide attempt, and I took 5 fentanyl 30s, put them in an ice cream scooper, and I had to get a 3 milliliter syringe to fit all this in, because a regular 100 cc wouldn't hold this shit. So I got a dog syringe. It's like as big as around my finger, and it's full. And I pushed it, and that was the last time I ever used. I woke up 9 days later in ICU. They had to resuscitate me. They had to, it was 6 Narcans or some shit. I don't know, but I know 3 days into ICU, my body had so much fentanyl in it that I actually went into overdose again. They had to come in and IV Narcan me 3 days after I was in ICU. So while I'm in there, I looked up at the ceiling. I'm laying there, and I'm going to say exactly what I said, because this is what I said. I just looked up at the ceiling and I said, "You motherfucker, you better show me something." That's just how it came out. And Like 10 minutes later, this nurse walks in. She grabs his clipboard. It's an older woman at the Henderson County Hospital. I still need to find this woman. So she comes in. She's looking at my chart, and she says, Knight. She was like, I used to know a Knight. And she was like, do you know Joanne Knight? She starts talking about my mother who had passed away in 1987. And this was like 5 minutes before I looked up at the ceiling. I was like, you better show me something. I got out. I drove myself to detox. Well, my sister drove me to detox the next day. That was September 9th, 2022. And I just went to detox. I'd been through many long-term treatment facilities before. I know what they all tell you to do. You know, I was like, I knew that there were ways to recover. I just never went for it. So I get out of detox. I come to Henderson. The first thing I do is I find a meeting, walk down there, and without even knowing what I was going to do, I see this old man. He was the first one that greeted me at the door, and he was like super nice. Man, you got a big book. You got this. You got that. And I was like, no, no. I asked him to be my sponsor, and I started working the steps. Now, I know people talk about the 12 steps. I do many different forms of recovery. I don't think that the 12 steps would have worked for me without therapy. And I don't think therapy would have worked for me if I wasn't able to be honest with myself like I was. My sponsor helped me to get there to do that. I love therapy. A sponsor's great, but there's professionals who can help you place these things in your mind to a healthy place in your mind. You know, I don't go to my sponsor for marital advice. He's been divorced 4 times. I mean, I'm not going to my sponsor for advice if I got problems in my marriage. I go to professionals for that. I mean, let's get real. If your roof's leaking, call a roofer. You know, if your marriage is broken, go to a freaking marriage counselor. Don't call your sponsor. And I tell my sponsees this all the time. It's like, I'm not a counselor, you know, and I have some who are on a lot of medication. They have, you know, some mental illnesses. And so, and I did myself. So 12 steps is great. But I feel with people like me, so severe, so much trauma, that there needs to be some clinical action with this 12 steps. That's just what worked for me. I'm not knocking, if you stay sober any other way, that's great. But I'm fucked up. I've had a lot of problems and psychological problems and whatever. But today, I spent many years behind bars. Today, I go into prisons. Every Tuesday, I go to prison in Branchville. That's where I served out. That's where I met my first wife. That's where I got her pregnant. And now I get to walk in here freely, you know, with a badge. Going, I just got to get my lead up there, like, I don't know, a couple months ago. It was great. So I can go into any prison, and I'm qualified to go into any prison in Indiana and do that. And I get to talk to them a lot about reiterating with the kids after being incarcerated, because that was really tough for me. I made every mistake you can make trying to get reconnected with my kids after being gone so long. And so I really love that more than anything. So all of my kids call me today. My stepdaughter, who is my wife's oldest daughter, she hated me for the long, like, this kid hated me from day one. And imagine how bad she hated me once I started putting her mother and her brother and all this through his shit. And, you know, she just asked me to walk my grandson down the aisle at her wedding, you know, a couple months ago. And she was the first one who called me on Father's Day this year and said, hey, happy Father's Day, I love you. And, you know, recovery is not easy. It's not going to be easy. 3 months into my recovery, my oldest daughter passed away. And, you know, it was where I was at that moment. I was at a place where I was cool with God. I was good with God, and I'm glad I was able to look at it as a gift of the time I did get to spend with her instead of going into hatred mode as to what was taken from me. So things are going to happen in recovery. And if I wasn't doing the right thing every day, if I didn't have people on my phone who were supporting me in what I was doing, I would have never made it through that. I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So if any of you are going through this shit, man, you can change. Uh, I don't care how many felonies you got. I don't care how bad your kids hate you. I don't care what age they are. You know, today, if my wife leaves me, I'll be okay. I will get through it. You know, it would hurt, but I don't have to use over it. If I used over it, my kids are going behind my grandson's going by, everything's gone. So just keep pushing, and help somebody. Just help somebody. I would not. That's what I do every day when I wake up. I do. I read my little readings, and I look at myself in the mirror, and I just usually when I'm shaving, I'll say, "Don't fuck up today. Help somebody out." And that's just what I say to myself. And every day, I just look forward to helping somebody. And if a day goes by, I don't get a chance to help somebody, it throws me off. And that's the only way I could deal with the shit I've caused through my life. That's my amends for things I can't make amends for. Is constantly trying to help somebody. Anything. I don't care if I don't help somebody in recovery, and I see somebody with a flat tire on the side of the road, I'm pulling over. I am addicted to helping people because if I don't, I'm scared. I'm scared of what I would do if I stop. And somebody help me. So help somebody. I love every one of you that goes through this, or any family that you see a loved one going through it. If that's the case, just hang in there. People do change, and that's a piece of my story.
Thank you so much for sharing. Your story is so powerful, Rob. I watch you every day helping guys and girls. I watch it every day. What you're speaking is what you put in action, and it's just beautiful to see. And I just see the purpose every day watching you, at work, watching you help people. And I'm just so grateful to be able to share your story with other people. And thank you so much for coming on here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for asking, and see the same with you, Krista. I haven't met you, Gracie, and so it's nice to meet you. And Krista, you're an inspiration, man. You're going to save a lot of women's lives. There's no doubt about it.